is episode 2 of Let's Talk Gender. Woohoo!
Welcome.
Super excited to have you all here with us today. We've got a good audience so far. It looks like we've got about 14 or so folks out there. So more folks keep trickling in. So that's great. Hopefully we'll have some folks sending questions and comments our way as we go. The topic for today's little Let's Talk Gender chat is going to be being trans in the workplace. And what's that look like? And what's that experience like? And what are the challenges? And what are some of the cool things about it? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Before we do that, I think it'd be great if we do a quick round of intros so you know who it is that's up here talking at you. So how about we'll just go through our group here. And if y'all hosts want to share, how about your name, your pronoun? And let's see, something interesting about yourself. So pick 1 or 2 things you want to share about yourself. Who are you? What do you do out in the world? Sound good? I'll kick it off real quick. So my name is Gil, and I'm one of the hosts. I'm a facilitator for our gender diversity teen and young adult groups. And so I work with a lot of the youth programming that we do. And other things about me, interesting things, I am a twin, which is kind of fun. So if you ever see someone who looks sort of like me in the world, but maybe not exactly, and they don't say hi to you, it's probably because it's not me. But don't take it personally. But that's a pretty fun experience. And yeah, I'll kick it off to who wants to go next. Y'all can raise your hand or just start talking. Y'all have the mic.
I'll go, why not? Hi, my name is Keyboard. I go by he and they. I'm sick, not doing well. We thought I might have the coronavirus. I don't, I just got my test back. I'm good. I just am normal sick. So I'm suffering, but I'm not suffering at the hands of current events. What else? Cool facts about me. I'm an actor. I do theater. I was in a Star Wars play last year, and I would be one in this year if, you know, the corona wasn't happening. So yeah.
That was a cool play too.
Yeah, it was a cool play. I miss it.
Yeah. In the future, they'll bring it back. It's all good. It's Star Wars. It'll never die. So
yeah. So yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Keyboard. Who's next?
I can go. I'm Aiden. I use he and they pronouns. My buddy here is Ezra. I am a costume designer for my high school's theater. Yeah, you want to talk too. And I've just been hanging out with my bird. I work at a vet clinic downtown here.
Awesome. And I was going to ask Ezra to introduce themselves, but I suppose you did that for him, so that's good. Nope. Ezra is our Let's Talk Gender mascot, which is pretty fun to have. So right on, right on. Cool. Well, so let's see. It's been a couple weeks since we all last met. And
yeah, hold on. We're missing a person.
Oh my gosh, I just totally forgot Matt.
Ding dong.
Before all this, and I'm like, oh Matt, we've been chatting for like 10 minutes now. So my apologies. Last but never least.
I'm Matt. I use he, him pronouns. I'm also a twin. Not identical though, so my sister and I do not look at all the same. And I also do theater. I did costumes the past 2 years. I decided to take a break this year, and I was going to do the spring play that was going to be student led, but it's not happening anymore. So it's next year, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I know so much has been postponed lately, right? It's like, man, I guess we're going to have to find some new hobbies or different ways to channel our hobbies and endeavors for the time being. So awesome. Well, I'm glad you all could join us today. It's great to see you all. It's been a couple of weeks since we've all been together. I know, there's a lot going on in the world right now. It started off with sort of the whole COVID-19 thing, and it's all socially distancing and a lot of school being postponed and some workplaces closing. So we've all had some unique experiences going on. There's also been a lot current events-wise with protests this last week, which has been just a moment in history. So just kind of want to call attention to that. I hope everyone has been sort of safe out there and doing our parts to educate ourselves on what's going on with some of the civil rights movements that we're seeing. I know we all like to be sort of allies across the board. And so just again, hoping there's lots of ways to educate ourselves out there and hoping you guys are being safe while we do some of that activism work. With that said, the topic for today's conversation is going to be being trans in the workplace. And so we had a couple questions come up in the past, so we picked this topic based on that. And so that'll be what we're going to focus on today and dig into a little bit. And we specifically picked some of our panelists who have experience working We do a group with that spans ages from teens all the way to young adults. And so some of our teens have worked, some have not, but definitely more towards the young adult side. We see a lot more folks entering the workforce. And so it's great to hear your experiences and what you've encountered, things to think about, as well as like, maybe we'll talk a little bit today about like the difference as you go from, I think we spend the first like 12 years of our lives in school systems, right? In one way or another. And then the transition from that out into like the workforce can be a bit different, a different environment. And there's sort of different rules at play and things that come up for us. And so maybe we'll just start with that. I'm curious as to, for our folks here, what's been different about being in the workplace and how your gender plays out in the workplace versus like how things were before, like if you were just in school or in your life with just your friends. So how has that been different, your gender experience at work versus the rest of your life? What do you guys think about that?
Well, I know when it comes to like school, a lot of the time it's like, I've known these people forever and I grew up with a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of makes it hard because if you change anything about yourself, they're like, oh, well, that's not the you that I knew like 2 days ago. So like, what the heck? Who are you now? But with work, it's like, well, it's just work. Like, I don't know any of these people. I can be whoever the fuck I want. They don't know. Or whoever the heck I want. They don't know. Like, gosh darn. Like when I initially entered the workforce, it was like, as far as any of these people are concerned, I have like, this is who I've always been. I don't have to like introduce myself and be like, oh, well, let me explain who I am to you, So I tend to find it's a little easier if you're going for like a stealth thing because you don't have to tell anybody. They don't care. They don't want to know. Like, and they're all dumb. Maybe they'll figure it out, but like probably not.
Yeah, you pretty much are who you say you are, right? You just kind of late.
People tend to take you by your word for it. Like, I haven't met anybody who's been like, are you sure that you're a cis? Like, are you positive? Like, people don't tend to look too far into it unless they're like really looking.
Yeah. Cool.
Anyway.
At work for me, gender doesn't really play a role like hardly at all, except for when clients decide that they want to figure out what pronouns to use for me and can't figure that out. I mean, with my coworkers, like they know I'm trans, they don't really care. I'm just Aiden to them. Like it's just normal. As long as I'm doing my job, it doesn't matter.
Gotcha.
I've had 2 different experiences because at first I worked, like the first job that I worked at, it was at a farm for agro-tourism, and it was a family friend that I knew. So they knew me, of course. They've known me since I was young, but it wasn't really a well-known thing for a lot of the other people I was working with. And then I recently got a job this year, and it was with people that I didn't know and people I weren't familiar with, and they didn't even think twice about it. Like they don't know.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, so it's kind of nice not having that sort of history of like year after year being in the same place the way you might be in the school system. You get to just show up as you and people kind of accept you. Great. So I have questions then about maybe a bit more about our gender expression and like how you show up at work. There's these ideas about the costumes we wear and the roles we play in life, right? So the idea that we might put on a costume for a different role. And really, like, we sort of do this all the time, right? You think, oh, I'm going to hang out with my friends. How do I feel today? How do I want to express myself? Oh, I might be going to the gym. I'm going to dress differently. Or I'm going to go on a date. Maybe I'm going to dress up. Or, if you're going to like a wedding, right? There's some things that sort of dictate maybe like what's acceptable, the kind of attire you would wear, right? The expectations around that. And the tough part is that like in society, a lot of our identities get wrapped up around our work, right? We spend a lot of time there. Maybe it's something you're passionate about. Sometimes it's just, you're working to like make an income, which is fine. But we do, as we spend more and more time at work, your identity, it gets connected to that. But there's also in the workplace some rules and like expectations around how to dress, as well as maybe how you're perceived and want to be perceived by others. And so I'm just curious as to like, how have y'all dealt with that? The idea of like how you want to show up at work. Do you dress the same as you do all the time? Do you express yourself the way you always do? Do you find you modify the way you express your gender because it's a workplace and there's something different going on there for you? So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that. How do you, do you show up at work the same? Is it different? What comes into play on a day-to-day basis when you think, how am I gonna get ready for work?
Well, I have a uniform, so I fight against that as much as humanly possible. I like, we have a bunch of like, what are they called? I don't know. I can't remember the exact words they use, but like, attire regulations, like what you can and can't wear. And some of it is just for looks and others for like safety stuff. Like for some reason, and I don't know why, no one has like given me a reason. You're not allowed at Domino's, you're not allowed to have a septum piercing. You can have any other face piercing you want, but you cannot have a septum. You can even have like a little nostril ring or whatever. Cannot have this one. I don't know why. No one has explained it to me. I've been given like weird, like, oh yeah, I think this is why they do it, but I don't really know, and it's always different every time. But there's stuff like that, especially if you're working in a big corporate thing where it's like you have a uniform specifically to, make everybody look the same, so customers don't feel bad if they treat you badly. Because it's like, oh, well, whatever, it's just another worker ant, who cares? So it's like, kind of try to fight against that. I wear earrings. I'm not supposed to. I wear them anyway. I don't know. I wear rings. I'm also not supposed to do that.
Keyboard, are there pieces like specifically to how you're expressing yourself, like your gender, that come into play?
Because like I'm non-binary, and it's kind of hard to express that when you're only allowed to wear a shirt and pants and nothing else. So like me being non-binary is important to me. And while I understand that like I'm just gonna be read as male all the time everywhere I go, there aren't people who are gonna look at me and be like, ah yes, non-binary king, we see you. I'm just gonna be read as a dude. But like, I don't know, I'll try to like include small things that it's like, oh look, see, it's me, I promise, I'm not just a dude. And it's also hard because I work with a bunch of like cis straight men, and they don't get it. They just think I'm a flamboyant homosexual, which like, ugh. But it's deeper, I promise. And none of them know, and the customers certainly don't know, and they don't know how to interpret it. But
yeah, for me, I have to wear scrubs to work. It's like a safety and like cleanliness thing. So I usually express myself like dyeing my hair. Obviously, it needs to be redone right now. And a lot of it comes out in my personality because like I'm a receptionist, so I'm supposed to like kind of be myself around the clients. So I'm just like very openly eccentric and stuff around them, and that's kind of just how I let my gender seep out into my work.
Cool. Awesome.
I worked at a quilting shop, and so it was very much all of the other employees in the front of the store were female. So I was the one male employee that was out there. I definitely expressed myself the way that I normally would, mainly because I have a deep enough voice. I pass very well. So I have the ability to just wear stuff that may be considered more feminine and be perceived as male. And I enjoy that. That's just like my style. And it was always like, I really liked expressing myself like that, but I was always a little bit hesitant because in the back of my head is like, they're gonna know, but they didn't. So,
Interesting. So that brings up an interesting concept around for folks who identify as non-binary, or even if you don't, but you like to express femininity through your gender expression. What are like the challenges around that at work, right? So whether it's around getting people to just understand who you are or use the right pronouns or name. And it can be different with staff, right, who get to know you versus like customers come in and they just perceive you in an instant and make an assessment. So are there any challenges for those of you who identify as more binary or express yourself that way, or even if you don't want to express some femininity, like how is that received when you do that?
I know for a fact, because it happens to me all the time. I get mistaken for a trans woman at work, and because I wear my hair in a high ponytail. I wear my hair in a high ponytail, and I am nice, and for some reason that gets read as like, oh, you're a girl, And so customers will like, I'll talk to them, and every once in a while I'll see it happen. They'll give me this like weird look. I'm like, oh God, I'm about to get hate crimed, aren't I? This like, they'll try to like misgender me on purpose. They're like, thank you, sir. Like they'll say sir really, really, really like specifically. I'm like, buddy, that's not how this works. Thank you for trying though. Like, you gendered me right, so whatever. And sometimes I'll get called ma'am and miss, and it's like, I don't particularly care that much. Like, if I was like earlier in transition and less comfortable with myself, I would probably be more uncomfortable. But I like, it's like, whatever. This is 2-second interaction. I don't have like, I have like 6 things on the screen. I don't have time to be uncomfortable about this. So like, I get worried. I wear makeup to work sometimes too, and I get worried that like, oh God, some customer's gonna like hate crime me or call me slurs or something, and I worry about that, and then I decide that like, you know what, whatever. If they call me a bad word, I'll just ban them and double their price. I don't care. I don't actually do that. No one does that. That's just a joke.
Yeah. But the thought crosses your mind, like it's something you're aware of, right? Of just
Yeah.
like, this is perceived and picked up on. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if anyone else can speak to that.
Yeah, what I usually get is over the phone, I sound like a girl. So people are like, oh, thank you, ma'am. And then I'll come out to their car to bring them their prescription or something. And I'll be like, wait, did I gender you correctly? Was that correct? And there'll just be like a solid like 5 seconds or so where they'll just like rethink the entire conversation they had with me over the phone. And it's kind of funny though to see their reaction of like,
yeah.
I have had a couple experiences like that too. My customer service voice is a lot higher than I normally talk. And even though I've had hair shorter than it is now, it's very grown a lot longer. I have been referred to as female, and I'm like, okay, it's really weird because I entered the workforce like 1 year on testosterone, and my voice was significantly deeper, yet I was still perceived female sometimes, but then people would correct themselves or they just wouldn't realize.
Gotcha. Yeah, and how is it different with like staff versus customers? Because it sounds like a lot of you have to engage with customers versus like your coworkers. Do your coworkers eventually get it and it gets easier, or is it mostly customers who, because they only see you for a moment, where you have challenges?
I mostly work morning shifts, so like those like 2 or 3 people that I work with in the morning, I'm super comfortable with. I like, they can see me in anything. They're like, yeah, whatever, Joel, you're the man. See you later. But like, people I work with later in the day who I don't see as often, I'm a lot more wary of. But like, if I saw them as often as I see the morning people, I probably wouldn't care as much. But I don't know them as well, so it's like, ooh,
Yeah.
ooh.
Totally. Okay. Anyone else want to speak about the difference between like staff and customer interactions?
at the vet clinic I work at, we're kind of just like one like closely knit family. Like we're all like friends and get along really well. So like they know basically everything there is to know about me and they don't care about any of it. But then the clients are just like, they try and figure me out and they just can't because I'm not that easily read at work. And so there's a matter of like, my coworkers are all gendering me correctly, and like the clients will hear that, but it won't match up with how they originally read me. So they'll sometimes get like an attitude. So
when I worked with my coworkers, I'd say most of the time they got it right. I think the few times they messed up, it was because they were referring to everyone that was working in the front area as ladies, and then I was still new at the time, and so they were like, oh, sorry, and Matt. I was like, okay, thanks.
Thank you for clarifying.
Great. Appreciate that. So yeah, and so I want to call out real quick. So we were going to have another panelist or two up here with us, and unfortunately they couldn't make it. And they were going to represent more of our trans feminine spectrum. And so just a call out that we are definitely trending towards like a trans masculine non-binary experience. And so we did have a question come through, and I'll pose this to y'all just in case you are able to speak to it. The question is, could we talk about how the gender or these similar experiences might play out for trans women if we have any friends or folks from our group who have talked about their experiences. So do y'all know, like, have you talked to friends who are trans feminine about like what their experiences at work is like? Has it been similar? Is there different challenges they also encounter because they're on that trans feminine spectrum? Any thoughts about that?
I mean, at best, I could sort of talk to the few times I've been mistaken for a trans girl, but like that doesn't really count, and that doesn't really help anybody. And like, I don't know. I would feel weird about sort of telling an experience that wasn't mine, just because it's like there are nuances that I definitely do not understand.
So yeah, and I appreciate that. It's always hard, right? We shouldn't be speaking for others. I can share though. So I work at Starbucks, which is a great, very inclusive, trans inclusive company. I've been there for 15, 16 years now. And so they've always been inclusive, but it's definitely gotten better and better as time has gone on. But what I have found is in like let's say like the first 10 years there, early on, before trans became quite as well known in the mainstream media and stuff, I think it's a lot easier for me as a trans masculine person to come in from the application process, right? So they see your name on a resume and then they meet you in person and it's like, okay, does this connect with what I was seeing on the resume? And I feel like I'm still visibly trans. I was definitely 16 years ago visibly trans. And so I think they picked up on it right away and they never skipped a beat. But I definitely think it's because it's like I'm on a trans masculine spectrum and they're, in our society, it's like, oh, well, tomboys are okay. Like we celebrate masculinity. So people just sort of rolled with it. And as I got into working with like the Pride Alliance and doing some advocacy work within our own company, what we found was when we got requests for help to help like a new employee and help do training for their team and help people, be able to support that employee and adapt themselves, usually the request for when we had a trans woman join. Like very rarely did I get a request where we've got someone who's trans masculine and they're trying to figure out how to adapt right in the workplace. It almost always was the other direction because I think it's just a little more challenging for folks, right? Society is just not as accepting of someone who, if they're visibly perceiving masculinity, but they're identifying as a woman, there's just like, it's just a tougher path, I think. And it's getting easier and easier, but there's still some of the challenges. And the big ones are around like restroom use. So if they had somebody who they started working pre-transition and they're transitioning on the job and they want to switch restrooms, that was usually one of the challenges of like, okay, like we can do the name, we can do the pronoun, how do we manage the restrooms? And we would just meet with folks and talk about it and do some training and education. And in general, most folks adapted pretty well. And Starbucks was great, would say, look, if other employees have an issue, like they can choose to use a different restroom in a different location. The trans employee gets to, do what's right for them. So they were really great about it, but we definitely had to have those conversations more for our trans women employees than for the trans guy employees. So I think it's good to call that out. So yeah, so great question there. I'm curious about just the process of applying for jobs, right? So I know in our groups, right, we have a lot of teens who are kind of going out there trying to find their first job. Even folks who've had a job, applying, it's always like kind of stressful and a little challenging. And I think even more so if you're someone where maybe you've got a name that doesn't match your legal ID cards, right? So, right, you can put whatever you want on the application resume, but at some point they're going to want to see your identification as prove you are who you say you are, and there could be a mismatch. And so now you've got to tell them what that's about. It could be that, right, on paper, it all looks good, and then you show up and your presentation is a little different than maybe the name, what they are expecting based on your name. So I'm curious, can y'all speak to the process of applying? Like, what did you guys do just when you filled out your application or for your resume? Did you have any challenges or did you have to navigate any discrepancies? And if so, how did you do that? How'd that go for you?
I have been lucky enough that I changed my name in a majority of my legal documents before I entered the workforce. And it definitely was a lot easier than if you had to go through all those legal processes because they have to check like your passport and your birth certificate, certain things to prove that you're who you say you are. And that as I was applying and to jobs, I realized how difficult that would be if I hadn't changed my name already.
Yeah, I never really went through like the whole application process. I had been volunteering at the clinic for several months before I asked them for a job. But when I was like actually like doing all the paperwork, like yeah, like Matt said, it would be really hard if I didn't have all of that done already. Because like you've got to have your like some form of like photo ID and then your birth certificate and social security, all of that. And if that's not changed, it can cause like a lot of issues if they don't know that you're trans already.
Yeah, it's going to come up somewhere, just that there's a mismatch in the name, and they're going to want to know why, right? So
I had none of my stuff changed, and I decided that I just wasn't gonna explain it to them. Which, thankfully, Domino's is very forgiving. They're very nice. Like they don't care. So like I put all my stuff in and they just didn't ask. And I was like, oh thank God. Thank you for not asking me. Like a lot of their stuff they just let you put in themselves. And like I had a friend of mine who I worked with as well, who at the time when I was at Domino's, I was just going by my dead name. And my buddy who started working with me, he was not. And so he had to like go in and be like, hey, I know it says this on my papers, but like this is my name and I would really like it if we could make my name be my name in the system, you know? So they sort of had to work with him on that. But like I just don't explain it. If they ask, they ask. And if they don't, I'm just like, well, cool, I didn't have to explain it to you. Sick.
nice.
I just hope the discrepancy doesn't haunt me.
So did y'all seek out places where you thought you knew it was going to be okay if it did come up? Like, did you do any research about the company you're working for? Or did you hear from friends that like, it'll be cool? Or how did that process go for you picking the place you were going to work?
I just picked a place that would pay minimum wage. Like, you'll pay me? I'll go there. All right.
So you're just willing to give it a try and see.
Did not do any digging. It did not do any research. If they were like not cool, oh well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the owner of the vet clinic I work at is a family friend, so we kind of knew that she would be accepting anyways. And I found out actually like a couple months into working there that one of my coworkers has a wife and she's like super chill. All of my coworkers except for one are women, by the way, if that wasn't clear.
Nice.
You're just gonna be on the floor now, okay. So I guess I kind of just found out later on that they were very accepting.
Okay, cool. How about you, Matt?
So I've worked at 2 small businesses. One was run by a family friend. It was the farm. And so they've known me for a while and they're very accepting and very nice. And then the second one I worked at, I went in kind of based on just the interest that I had because it was a quilting place and I have interest in sewing, of course. And so I went in and applied and I got the job. And I kind of didn't tell anyone and was just listening to what people were saying in the workplace before I was going to say anything. But after I'd been there for a little bit, I realized that definitely the people working there were a lot more liberal leaning, and so they probably would have been fine with it if I had told them, but I didn't. So
Yeah, so it sounds like you sort of just went with, like, you didn't do a ton of research before to find out, hey, is this company super trans friendly? And it worked out.
One of the issues though is trying to change your name in the middle of like working somewhere. Like I am in the middle of changing my name to Keyboard, and it's like I have not told anybody at work. None of them know. And it's like, will I ever tell them? I'm kind of nervous about their reactions to my less than conventional name. Like all the people who I know, like I have a lot of friends online, and all of them, like they don't care. They think it's really cool that my name is Keyboard. They already call me that like automatically. But it's like there is the real world, and the real world has consequences. And like sometimes people hear your name and they go, huh, that doesn't sound like a name to me. I'm gonna be rude about it. It's like, I don't know what to do in that situation, frankly. But, you know. And then you have to go through the process of being like, I gotta correct people now when they get my name wrong. And I don't know. I don't entirely know what to do about it. It's a new situation for me. I'm not excited, but
Yeah.
changing
Yeah.
my name the first time was hard enough as it was. I don't know
Mhm.
if I'm ready to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's tough because, you know, there's your common use name. You can ask people to call you whatever you want. They'll use nicknames, they'll use whatever you want. But like when you're at work legally to get you a paycheck, right? They're going to need your legal name. So somebody has to know. But oftentimes it could be that your coworkers don't need to know if you're okay going by whatever former name you want to go by. But like you're either human resources or maybe your manager, like someone's going to need to know to like make the change. Otherwise you won't get paid, right? So,
It's like, update everybody. I made some decisions.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So at some point, like there'll have to be a conversation if you know, if you legally change your name with somebody, but you could still, if you don't want to deal with it with your coworkers, you can just tell HR, hey, this is just legal. I'm okay with still going by this name. I'll tell them when I'm ready. And that's probably okay to do too. So,
Yeah.
cool. So we have a question come through here. And the question is, would you do research and do things differently as you figure out other avenues of employment going forward? So, you know, you guys are sort of in your first round of jobs, kind of after getting out of high school or, you know, finishing up school, that kind of stuff. And is there any advice you'd have for youth who are starting to look for work? So there's like the initial, as they start to look for work, what would you tell them? And also as y'all think about whatever your next career piece might be, would you do anything differently? So why don't we start out, let's start out with because there's kind of two questions here. Let's start out with the, would you do research or do anything differently as you figure out other avenues of employment for the future? Would anything change next round for next time around?
Yeah, I think I will probably do a little bit more research to see if they're LGBT friendly. I got really lucky with my workplace right now that they are really friendly.
Mhm.
And I don't think I would adapt very well to going from a super friendly place to a super not friendly place. So I'm probably going to actually like straight up ask them like, hey, what are you going to do if someone's transphobic to me? Because like, I don't want to be working in a place where they're just going to brush it off and be like, oh, it's just them joking around. Like,
Yeah.
Like, I would like it if you actually did something about it. That'd be cool. Maybe like write them up. I don't know. Do the thing that do your job. What if you did your job? Like, that would be sick.
Mhm. And how do y'all know how you'd go about researching? Like, what would you do if you wanted to find out, hey, I want to get into this field. I think there's a company. How do I find out more about them? What would you do to try to figure that out?
I don't know, because sometimes like, this is public knowledge. Domino's has given money to some less than desirable campaigns in the sense that I know they've given money to like homophobic things, but like Domino's is full of queer people. Domino's is full of trans people. Like corporately, or like the CEO might not like gay people, but all the friends, like in Seattle at least, they like, it's like, yeah, gay people are great. Bring them here. Come on to Domino's if you're gay. Hell yeah. So like, sometimes the research that you do does not always correlate. Like the things you read about a corporation do not always correlate necessarily to like what it's actually like working there. But I don't really know how you would research that necessarily. Like,
if it's a small business, you can sometimes look at their website and sometimes like they'll have like employee bios that might mention something, or like they'll say like safe space on their window or something like that. Or like, quite honestly, for me, I'm probably just going to straight up ask them like, hey, what do you think of trans people? Because I am one. And if you're not going to be accepting to me, I don't want to work here.
I'm one whole trans people. Please be nice.
Yeah. Yeah, really, like if you can't even have that conversation, that's very telling of like the kind of environment you might be walking into, right? So it's a good point. So what tips or advice do you have for youth who are starting to look for work, maybe for the first time, or they're trans and they're going out there and they've got to put an application in, or they want to find a place to work? What do y'all think?
Well,
I think with, at least in my experience talking to my friends and stuff, small businesses are a lot more accepting than big corporations and stuff. They're a lot more willing to bend their policies to fit you, things like that. And they're also more likely to have gender neutral restrooms because they're just like in a building with one shared bathroom. So probably definitely start there if you can, like if you want to work at a local coffee shop or like like me, be a receptionist for a small business. I think that that's really good place to start because it's a lot more personal when you're working with one building rather than like a branch.
Yeah, I have to agree with Aiden on that. I've worked like exclusively for small businesses, and I've had pretty good experiences with them. Although in the current climate, it is going to be a little bit more difficult to get a job at a small business. But if you are going to work for a bigger corporation, definitely, I know this can be hard for some people, but you really do need to advocate for yourself, especially going into a workspace that you need to have that ability to feel safe and respected.
I would love to stop working for corporations. I would love to do that. If you have a small business and you're in Seattle, you need a manager, hit me up, please. I beg of you.
You know, it's funny hearing y'all say that because my experience has been the opposite. When I was in college and worked for small businesses, they were not accepting at all. They were really rude, and I quit because they were just horrible. And at best, they were like tolerant. And so when I was like, okay, enough of this, I sought out big companies who I knew had like policies that were LGBT inclusive. And so it's really funny to hear that because like, you know, corporations, I know they get a bad rap. They're like cookie cutterish. But because they're so big, there's a lot of attention and there's a lot of pressure on them to like treat people well. So it's just really funny that like we sort of have different experiences. My guess is it probably depends on whoever's running like the local store, right? And like whoever the local management are. But yeah, you can, you know, what is it, HRC? And I don't know if I think most folks just point HRC, but there's this corporate equality index and they rank all the big companies pretty much in the US. And you can go see and they score them. They get 100%, which means they offer trans inclusive health benefits. They've got gender, they allow people to use the restroom of their choice, that kind of stuff, names and pronouns, all that good stuff. So you can kind of go through and read and be like, oh, like, you know, this bank or this clothing company or whatever it is, Target, whatever, you'll see where they rank and you can see the policies they have. So you can see what's important to you. So it's just really funny. It's like, depends on what you're looking for, I guess.
Yeah, and you can always like ask a friend who's worked there before, or like even quite honestly, just ask someone who is working there. Just wait until their manager walks out of the room, and they will probably be fairly honest with you.
What's it like here?
Right.
Yeah, go see if you can find some like visibly queer people at whatever store you're going to, and be like, hey, I got a question for you. Find the person with like the dyed hair or something, right? Like, pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, I went and before I started at Starbucks, I had a friend who was a lesbian who worked there. So I knew they were cool, but like I was still like, yeah, but what's the culture like? This is down at the corporate building. And so I went there one day and brought lunch with me and sat in the parking lot for an hour and just watched the people coming in and out of the building. Like, how do they dress? Like, how do they seem to interact? And what I was looking for people who are gender nonconforming essentially to see like what the culture was. And I saw a bunch of that. So I was like, okay, like I won't be the only person, right? And so that was pretty cool.
You stalked the Starbucks building?
I totally stalked it. This is like 16 years ago before things were quite
so weird. It's cool that you did that, but that's really weird.
Well, I'd worked in enough places where I knew like I didn't want to go to a culture that like didn't walk their talk. I was like, because a lot of people will be like, oh, it's fine. And it's one thing to say like you're okay, you know, with folks who are gay, but it wasn't about that for me. I knew it was around like gender expression and how people were going to perceive me. And so I just needed to see that like, hey, you know, what's it going to be like when I show up looking like I do kind of thing. So interesting. Cool. So what do you all look for in a positive work environment? What are things you think are important? Y'all have been in the workforce. So if you've got, you know, younger folks maybe coming out to work for the first time, like, what do you think is important? What makes for a good work environment, makes for a fun work day? And, you know, some of it's related to gender, some of it not, but I think the gender part comes into play a little bit, right? Because that's how people perceive us when they interact with us. But yeah, so what do y'all look for in a positive work environment as someone who's trans?
For me, it's just the ability to like be yourself. If you see other coworkers just kind of goofing off around each other when they have free time and like genuinely smiling, it's probably going to be a pretty good workplace. If they seem fairly laid back, I mean, it probably means they're going to be fairly laid back with you and your gender. So I think that the happier the employees look, the happier you're going to be there.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
What else do y'all look for?
what I look for especially is how the other employees treat each other. Like sometimes you can just go in as a customer if it's like a shop and see how the employees interact, because for me, like just having the employees respect each other is a really big thing, because I don't want to work there if the people I'm working with don't respect me.
Yep. Great call.
I don't like it when management is like super detached, but like, you know, like detached, like when they trust you, it's nice. It's like management that like understands that like you're an adult and you can do your job, and I don't need to hover over you and tell you what to do every minute of the day.
Right. Like they trust you, but they're still attentive to their job.
Yeah, like they'll listen to you if you need questions. They'll step, like they won't like just let you do the wrong. You know how sometimes some people are like, oh, I didn't want to tell you were wrong because like I was nervous. It's like, no, just tell me I'm wrong, please, for the love of God. I want to do the right thing. I want to do what you asked me to do correctly. I beg of you. So it's like management that like understand, like gets that, you know. A good manager will make your job so much better.
Totally. I agree. They often say it's like when you leave or quit a company, usually they say you quit the manager, not the company. It's usually like the direct people you're involved with. So finding good folks is good. So we've got another question from our audience here. Can you talk some more about each of your aspirations and apprehensions, gender related, about your careers, like on a long-term trajectory? So, you know, like 10 years from now, where would you like to be? Or what, you know, what kind of work do you want to do in the world, and what kind of aspirations and apprehensions related to gender might come into play for that?
Well,
that kind of nodding a little too. I don't know.
Yeah. I want to go into theater and stuff, which is something I've been worried about honestly for a while. We don't exactly have a lot of like trans male like big names out in the world, especially not in stage acting, which is what I want to go into, because I do not care for acting on film. But I worry about that, because when you act on stage, like, you know, sometimes you gotta be shirtless, and I don't really want top surgery all that bad, and it's like, oh, ooh, that's a little freaky. I don't like that one. And I don't know. I worry about like weird things, like, what if I don't know. It's weird. I worry about the way like people might perceive me, especially as like, because I know I read so masculine. It's like, not just a dude. Please don't forget that. My gender is important to me. Like, ugh. But that aside, I do really want to get into stage acting and like and do it professionally. And I am like excited about like meeting other trans people who want to be actors and stuff like that. Because like, you know, there are a lot of them. They just don't get to. They don't get to be famous. They don't get to get big like the stars do. It's like, I would like to do that. I would like to be a famous trans actor. I think that would be sick. I think that'd be pretty epic. So I'll work on it.
Yeah. So
See what
yeah, it's like, well, we're starting to see a little more trans representation in like TV and movie media, but yeah, it's like about
I
theater.
especially want more trans male representation. People always, I don't know why, people get really upset when you bring up the fact that there are no, like, it's like there are no, like, there just aren't any trans male anything in the media at all. And I don't know why, but there are some people who get really mad at you for bringing that up. Like, you're saying, oh, well, we should have more trans men instead of trans women. It's like, no, trans women deserve as much good media as they can get. But like, we could also use some, please. Like, there are multiple cameras. We don't all have to point them in one direction. We can spread them out. It's okay.
Right. Or we could have more than one trans character in a story, right?
Yeah, make the whole cast trans. Like, Jesus, we could, like, it's okay. And like,
Totally.
I don't understand why some people get so upset when you bring this up. They're like, no, you're wrong, and you're also and you're being rude. And it's like, a crumb of representation is what I'm asking for. This is not difficult.
And that's the challenge, right? When we have so little representation, everyone's like, oh, well, finally, we've got this for whatever identity or population. But it's like, well, it's not really about which one of us gets to represent. It's like, no, we just need more for everybody.
There's so little, we act like it's like a pie. Like, well, if we only get so much, okay, we're only getting so much representation, so we need to give it to like these other people instead of you. And it's like, well, all right, I'll just be the representation then. That's the goal. That's what I want.
No,
I want
the
to
goal
be
is
the
more
representation.
So let's go. How about for Matt or Aiden? Do y'all want to talk about your aspirations and apprehensions for future career stuff?
Yeah, I want to be a veterinarian. And I know for a fact, based off of listening in on some of the awful phone conversations that my boss has on the phone with clients, like when they think they're smarter than you, they will pick every little thing out of like your life that they think that they can use to prove you wrong and like make you seem like you don't know what you're doing. And I want to be very openly trans kind of my whole life. I don't ever want to stop advocating for that. And so part of that, I'm a little bit worried that clients and stuff are going to be like coming to me and be like, oh, you're trans, so you don't know what you're talking about with my pet, things like that. So I'm just kind of going to have to find like a state to work in where people are a little bit more liberal.
Yeah. Well, I would think, I mean, I know our trans and LGBT community love our pets, right? So have a good audience out there somewhere for it. They'll be, you'll have customers, no worries. But yeah, but it's a good thing to bring up, right? I mean, it's that idea that like you're always gonna be judged for this in some way, and you're gonna have to work extra hard to prove yourself and that to prove your competence and your ability to just overcompensate for this judgment people have. Yeah, I mean, that's legitimate, right? I think a lot of us experience that and feel that. It's sort of like this idea, like you're gonna have to be perfect, right? Otherwise, because people are gonna hold you to the standard, otherwise they're gonna disregard your skill. So yeah, for sure. Matt, how about yourself?
So I want to be a lawyer. So that's coming up really quickly because I'm going to be a senior next year. And it's definitely something that I know is a kind of difficult, especially with a lot of trans rights being a big discussion and a whole part of like the political scene nowadays, even though they are just basic, human rights. And so there is a lot of law that does play into that. And I know that if I continue to go down the path that I want to go down, I'm going to encounter people that I might work with that may not agree with me and just what I believe, even though I think that I should be able to exist with the rights that everyone else has. So I know that's going to be something that I will encounter. And I also know that even though I am transmasculine, so of course, like I have experienced life as both, but law actually has one of the largest pay gaps. So female lawyers get paid a lot less than male lawyers. And that's something that I know that is not great.
Yeah, we talked a little earlier, it's about like challenges with if you're someone who expresses femininity at work, right? And that could be in any embodiment, but it's that reality of that there's this gender double standard of anyone, right? Women in society, there's that gender pay gap. And so I think a little of that trickles over into the trans world, right? For folks who express femininity, regardless of like how they identify, that piece comes into play. Yeah, so that's really interesting. What's going to be interesting is that based on, right, like, I mean, I believe you're perceived in the world as a guy, right? And so how you experience it, but then internally you sort of are going to see what's going on maybe on a different level than some folks who aren't quite so aware, just based on how you're treated and to see how pay comes along with that. So maybe you'll just have to be one of those advocates to make sure like, hey, wait a minute, my coworker over here and I are doing the same work. What's going on with their pay, right? So cool. Well, there's a number of trans lawyers out there in the world, some of them famous because they take on big cases. A lot of them work for the ACLU. I'll have to send you some names of them. You can look them up and just read about their careers and experiences, but it's really cool work that they're doing. So maybe you can join that cause a little bit. So, awesome. All right, Joel, do we want to put a call out to see if there's any other questions from our audience members out there? And then for our panelists, while we wait just to see, is there anything else that you're thinking about in terms of like being trans at work that we haven't covered that you think we should touch on? Anything we missed, any experiences that you're like, yeah, this didn't fall into a category, but here's a thing, right? This has come up.
I mean that's weird. that I've experienced a couple of times. 'Cause it's like, you know, this might be purely a transmasculine thing. I don't really know. It's like, you know, fucking, I remember. Sorry, I keep swearing. I'm so sorry. It's like, you know, I remember being a girl. I remember what it's like being scared of men, and like sometimes, you know, they get mad and they yell and they throw things around, and it's like, I need to go in the back and sit down.
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy, please don't do that. And like, I get like anxious that like people will like catch on to that and realize it and like use it against me at work.
Mm-hmm.
And like they probably won't. I don't work with people who do stuff like that. But like I worry about it anyway. And like I don't know. It's this weird sort of like trans like it's specifically tied into like they're gonna catch on to the fact that like I was a girl and I remember what it was like, and like they're gonna like all this stuff. And like it's this weird trans anxiety thing that like is like kind of misgendering myself a little bit and like kind of like not. It's a weird like mix of things that I worry about constantly. Like whenever any of my coworkers get mad and like raise their voices too high, I'm like, oh. It's all here. The whole anxiety's here now. And like I don't know how to deal with that. I have not been dealing with it. But like it's just I don't know if that's I don't think that's a universal like anxiety, but it's definitely something that I like worry about and experience a lot.
I've definitely experienced that. I have been yelled at work before, and it was not by a man but a woman, and it scared me really bad because it was almost like it was just it scared me more than like some other like I guess that I perceive what a cis man would. So it made me worry like, oh, are they gonna realize? And also like a mixture of other things. But I worked in a predominantly like female environment, and in my brain I was like, oh, they're gonna find out, and then what if they are like, oh, well, you're actually just a girl working here and you're not actually a guy. So it was, I get that fear.
It's a weird like it's such like an anxiety thing. It's like they're not gonna like find out. That's not how that works. But it's like, oh, they're gonna use their psychic abilities and like read my history, be like, oh, I see, and just like I don't know, kill me or something. Like I don't know, like fire me, I guess, or just like I don't know. But it's such a weird like anxiety. Oh, and it's only when people get mad too. Like, never any other time. So bizarre. I don't know where it comes from.
I mean, I think it's fairly common just for anyone, right, who's transitioned, unless maybe they were super, super young, like a little kid who has very little memory of having lived in a different gender. But it's pretty common even after years of transition to be like, it's just that it's in that head of like, what if they find out? Like, find out what? Like that, you had a different experience early on, but I think there's something about the trans experience that just sort of sits there because it's, at least early on, it is a piece of it, right? Before, I mean, some people pass before transition, but for most folks, there's a period where like you're wanting to be read a certain way and you're not, and then you finally get there, but you still have that history in your head, right? And just based on what's in society, fears around what happens to folks when people find out they're trans, even if we haven't experienced it personally and we've been unlucky, we know it's out there. And so it's sort of always in the back of your head. And so I can imagine that, yeah, someone raises their voice or something. It's like a double whammy. It's one, someone's raising your voice at me. This isn't cool. And two, like, what if it's because I'm trans and now there's this, not only do they find out, but there's a little anger here in some way. Also, too, I think there may be something around like male gender norms, this idea that like men should be tough and it should be fine if I yell at them, and one guy throws a pot in the back and like other guys shouldn't react to it because that's just what guys do. Like there's this norm around like what's the expectation, and then if we're thinking like this is not cool, in your head you're wondering how are they going to react if I don't turn on whatever the stereotype or the macho is to be okay with it.
Part of it is like
be okay with it.
Part of it is like, first of all, there shouldn't be yelling and throwing things around in the first place. That's super unprofessional. That's not cool. But
Yeah.
then I always feel weird. Like sometimes I want to ask him, like, hey, like, don't do that anymore. Like,
Mhm.
I have a list of reasons why I don't want you to do that.
Yeah.
But I feel like weird, like asking them, like, oh, I'll just be quiet about it. Like, oh, be fine. It's like, don't. You're giving me anxiety attacks. Stop.
Yeah.
Freaking me out. I don't know what it's doing to other people. You need to find another way. If you're mad, you need to find another way to express it because it's really upsetting to me, and I'm sure it's upsetting to other people as well.
Yeah. And I wonder too, like how much of that is based on your socialization when you're a kid, right? If you were socialized as a girl versus a guy, right? Like what is acceptable? But I like what you said, like it's on the one hand, it's just not professional. And maybe you can rely on the professional piece of being like, hey, y'all, like this is a workplace. You can't be throwing stuff, you know, and just play it off on that card versus like, you're making me feel weird. It's like, nope, it shouldn't be happening at work, you know?
Because like
Okay.
at my job specifically, you know, it's a kitchen. Like you kind of get away with a lot of things in a kitchen, but like we have boxes and sometimes people like smash them or throw them around or like bang their fists on like the counter. It's like, please don't do that. You will make me cry. Ah! It's like, how do I say that to you without you calling me a gay slur? They probably won't, but it sure is an anxiety that I have. So
Examples where you might see like how you were socialized as a kid come into play like in the workplace now, where it's like, oh, it's because, you know, the experience I had being younger, maybe in a different gender, that I'm this way now. Like if I hadn't, you know, if I wasn't trans, I probably wouldn't feel this way. Do you think it's more because of socialization, like the way you respond to things? Have you all experienced that at all with anything?
I need to rephrase that question. What?
Yeah, sorry, I was all over it. Like, kind of,
yeah, you
like,
went to
I was
Mars.
like, all,
I don't know where we are anymore.
well, I was just thinking like, you know, people who are socialized as a girl get certain messages, right? And so then if you're in the workplace as a man, it's like, there's some info you didn't get as a kid or some socialization you didn't get that you're just not used to that suddenly you're now getting, right? Like you're a guy, you should be okay with me throwing a pot, right? Like that's other guys are. It's just, or more physical aggression is the norm.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't experience that growing up.
People act like I'm like weird for being nice, like really nice. Like, you know, I'm like a normal level of nice to people, and sometimes my coworkers be like, "Why are you so nice to customers?" Like, there's no reason. I'm like, "What? What do you mean?" Like, I don't know. It's weird. It's really weird. Like I thought this sounds like a fantasy. Like you sound like a straw man argument. Like, what are you talking about? What do you mean I'm too nice? Like, what?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, so most of my coworkers, I think I said it before, they're almost all women. I think I have one male coworker and I rarely actually work with him. And I kind of wonder how that would change if like I had more male coworkers. Cause like all of my coworkers are like very nice to the clients. And then afterwards they'll come up to the reception desk and just rant to us. It's kind of funny how like nice they'll be. And then suddenly they're just like, oh my gosh, I hate this person so much and I need to tell you about it now. I kind of wonder if that would change if maybe there were more people that were raised male in the clinic. But I don't know where I was going with that. I kind of wonder though about why we react so differently in that gender situation.
The dynamic of working with all men versus working with all women is like pretty different. Because like in the mornings, I generally work with all men, and then like not like midday to night, it like is mostly women, and it's like the dynamic is very different. Like, you know, I think everybody, no matter like where they work, does the whole like I'm nice to the customer over here, and the minute they leave, I turn around and go like I hate that. Like if I ever see them again, they're like I swear to God, but like. So like sort of like the way that they'll talk about the customers is really different, and like the way that they'll like approach situations is different, and it's weird to be like, oh, it's gender, because it's like it's just the way people approach things, like whatever. But then it's like, God, you're so aggressive. Why are you so aggressive all the time. You don't need to do that. Like, just calm down.
Right. And I hate being like, I hate that I'm saying like, oh, it's like women, women, women. Cause like, I don't think it is really gendered, but it's like, it's more in like the way you're raised. And
Mhm.
in this day and age, like, yeah, people are raised differently based off of gender. Like it sucks. It shouldn't happen, but it does.
Yeah, like I definitely don't think that like gendered attitudes are like a inbuilt like thing that we're born with. It's just like you know, men are allowed to be more aggressive, and so they are. And I feel like women generally are taught like don't be doing that. You know, you gotta be nice. You gotta be demure. You gotta you gotta do all these things and jump through all these hoops and whatever. It's weird, and it's like people react to things in weird ways now in the workforce, and it's really bizarre, and like you gotta like roll with it. It's really weird.
Humans are funny creatures, aren't they? So we have one more question come up here. This one says, do you feel like your employer has your back if there are any transphobic behaviors at the workplace from customers or colleagues? Do y'all feel like your employers would have your back?
That depends on which employee is doing the thing. Like if it like for me, it's like, well, yeah, that really depends on who's doing it. Like my employer is cool and all, but he's also not a very confrontational kind of person. And I feel like a lot of employers are kind of like that, where it's like, oh, firing people and having conversations isn't fun, so I don't really want to do it all that bad. But also, the way management works at Domino's is very different. Like you work side by side with your manager like every day. And it's really hard not to become really good friends with your manager. So like, yeah, you can you're not supposed to be friends with your boss, but it's real hard not to. 'Cause like I said, you work with them side by side every day, doing the exact same things that they're doing. So like, if I were to tell my boss, hey, so and so is like being transphobic, I like in my brain I could see him being like, oh well, that is not great. I'll talk to him, and it's like that's probably not gonna be enough, but okay, buddy. We'll see how it goes.
Totally.
Yeah, I think my boss would be really supportive and like take initiative right away. She's kind of like she's the kind of person who's like really chill until something happens that goes wrong, and then you're like you don't want to be on her bad side ever. It's just not good when you do something. And we have like a very strict zero tolerance policy for like any sort of hate against our employees, whether it's just ranting about them like behind their backs, like saying they're stupid or things, or like actual slurs. Like it's pretty strict. Like we're not allowed to talk bad about each other. Like that's not a place for that to happen. If we want to talk about them behind their backs, it's going to happen outside.
My manager, so after I had been yelled at work, it was by another coworker. I had gone to my manager and had explained what had happened, and they had talked to her, and it was definitely, it felt like they were trying to diffuse the situation as best as possible and support me the best that they could. So I think that if that something were to happen, definitely would have. My work, a lot of our customers were older, so it did definitely help that I was very much perceived as male and at best just gay, which is accurate, but it was definitely like I had the advantage there, but it's just when it comes to jobs like that, you definitely need to make sure that your manager will, or your boss, or whoever is in charge will be there to support you.
That's good. Yeah.
I think part of the issue that I have is that like in the past, like in high school, I tried to report people for like transphobia, and I was never listened to. So I just don't trust people to like do anything about it. Like, someone's transphobic to me, I'll deal with it personally. I don't trust anybody to help me with it. So, like, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's probably just like a me issue. I'm sure my manager would actually like help and have my back and whatever. have issues. Sorry.
No, it's fine. We're getting close to time. I just want to chime in. There was, we do have a comment or two coming through here just about our conversation. And one person was saying that like how people perceive them, assuming that a behavior is either male or female can be way off, right? So I think that probably holds true for a lot of folks based on like, some people can't always tell your identity by looking at you. You know, people might play with their expression. And so absolutely, I think people often probably don't read the right cues and on many different levels. So I think that was just a great call out I want to mention. So we are just about it. We're actually a little past time. So we're close to wrapping up here. I want to thank all the audience for sending in the questions. It was always great to see what people have to say and what they want to know about. And a thank you to our hosts as well, Keyboard Matt and Aiden for being here, and Ezra for being our bird mascot. This show, Let's Talk Gender, it's a production of our TYTAN group. TYTAN stands for Trans Youth Taking Action Now, and it is our teen and young adult leadership program. And so it's been pretty cool with the whole COVID thing going on and us having to socially distance. We haven't been able to meet in person, but this was one of the cool projects we were able to put together to kind of keep the group going and just keep making an impact on the world. So we're going to keep doing a couple more rounds of these. I think next month we know is Pride Month, and so we're toying with the idea of doing something relating to Pride, but we haven't totally hammered out that yet. Keep your eyes peeled on the email listserv as well as Facebook. I think you'll see an announcement in another 3 or 4 weeks for the next round of this. I believe we wanted to aim for June 22nd, if that's correct. It's like maybe the 3rd weekend in June. So that might be the next episode of Let's Talk Gender. So hopefully you can all join us then. Any final thoughts or words from our other hosts there? Good job, everybody. Cool. Well, stay safe out there. Keep, doing what you need to do to keep yourself healthy and happy during these challenging times. And we look forward to seeing you all next time around. All right, everybody. Thanks again. Take care. Peace out.
Have a good